Hey everyone, welcome to Techstrong TV. I'm Alan Schimmel, sitting in for Charlene O'Hanlon, who's down in Dallas at our InnoTech conference yesterday and today. It was a great conference from what I've heard. But, Techstrong TV stops for no man or woman. And so today's show is a strong one. Let me tell you a little bit about it. We have two different segments today from our friends at ServiceNow. They just did their quarterly release. They've got some exciting new functionality and features. And we've got, as I mentioned, two different ServiceNow segments here to go over with you. One is Marcus Torres. Marcus is GM VP of App Engine, and he's joined on this segment by Tom Freeman, who's a Senior Technical Product Marketing Manager. We are going to see a demo and hear more about the App Engine for ServiceNow. Great tool for low-code, no-code, both citizen developers and professionals. I think the interview and the demo will speak for itself. Really good stuff. After that, I'm going to be joined by my friend Jeff Hausman. Jeff, of course, is the SVP and GM for the Operations Management portfolio at ServiceNow. Joining Jeff will be Chad Corneview. Chad's prepared a nice demo and presentation as well, talking about the quarterly store launch update, Service Operations Workspace. I mean, in many ways, this is just a game changer for a lot of you folks out there. You don't want to miss it. Jeff's team is always innovating, and they really, I think they blew it out this particular release. But I'll leave that for you to check out for yourself. After our friends from ServiceNow, next up we have another episode of the great series that Charlene O'Hanlon and Tracy Bannon have been doing called Techstrong Women. This is episode 5. It's actually part 2, though, of a two-parter called Generational Diversity. And in this part 2, Charlene and Tracy are joined by Nashida Henry of Deloitte and Beth Ann Bygum of Axicom. So good stuff there, as always, from Charlene and Tracy. After that, we are going to do our Something Old segment, and today it's coming from the Secure Software Summit, and it features Steve Springett talking about Behold the SBOM, practical and strategic advice for making SBOM work for you. And of course, SBOMs and supply chain security is kind of top of mind for a lot of folks. So I think you'll enjoy that. Charlene has some new segments after that, and then we're going to be jumping over to an interview Charlene did with Kev Bryan, Director of Cyber Threat Research at Immersive Labs. And they've recently launched an inaugural Cyber Workforce Benchmark report that Kev will discuss with Charlene. Will be pretty good. Then we have another segment this week, and that is The View with Vizard, Mike Vizard, Chief Content Officer here at Techstrong. Mike's guest today is Jason Schmidt, General Manager of the Software Integrity Group at Synopsys. And, of course, recent news, Synopsys acquired White Hat from NTT. You know, I've been a White Hat follower since Jeremiah Grossman started the company years ago. Happy to see it over at Synopsys, where I think it fits in well with their product mix and how this is going to improve application security for everyone. That'll wrap it up today for Techstrong TV. It'll also be our last show this week. We'll be back next week with a lot more fresh content. So here now, first up with our friends at ServiceNow.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, first up, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we have Marcus Torres, who's the GM and VP of App Engine, along with Tom Freeman. Tom's going to give us a actual demo of the new App Engine Management Center, which is pretty slick center to manage low-code, no-code. Whether you're a citizen developer or a pro developer using some low-code, no-code tools, ServiceNow is a leader in the space. Marcus will tell us more about it, but I think it's a great interview. Here it is now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I've got some big product announcements coming to you today from our friends at ServiceNow. I want to introduce you to Marcus Torres and Tom Freeman of ServiceNow. Marcus, Tom, welcome to Techstrong.
Hi, great to be here, Alan.
Great to have you both on. Tom, you are the Senior Technical Product Marketing Manager for the App Engine Workflows. And we're going to have you doing a demo, hopefully, in just a little bit. But before we do that, I wanted to give Marcus a chance, kind of introduce himself, and kind of lay the table for what you're going to be sharing with our audience. So, Marcus, if you don't mind, why don't you take it away?
Sure, thanks, Alan. So I'm GM and Vice President of App Engine, which is ServiceNow's amazing low-code application development platform, which we've been a leader within the market for quite a few years now. And actually just recently, we had the honor of being recognized as customer choice for one of the best low-code application development platform. And what we're here and what we're really talking about is our launch of App Engine Management Center. Now, what that really is about is helping solve one of the biggest challenges with low-code and citizen developer programs today for larger organizations. What's happening is they are empowering all of their organization to really innovate using low-code within their department, within their enterprise. But what they want is they don't want some of the pain points of the past to happen for today and for the future. And what some of those pain points have been is, I don't know what's happening with all of these innovations across the enterprise. And so they're really looking at a way to manage, view, and essentially govern these low-code citizen developer programs end to end. Think of it almost like citizen DevOps, right? In a typical DevOps software development lifecycle, we manage every aspect of that lifecycle when developing software. Well, with low code and citizen developer programs, you have a lot of people innovating on their own who have no idea, nor necessarily should they, have to understand what is happening across sort of all of these different life cycles of software development. So here at ServiceNow, what we've done is we've essentially baked that into our platform, our low-code platform, and then we've put the centralized App Engine Management Center as a way to really manage it end-to-end, to some degree invisible to the citizen developer, but absolutely aligned to the business and their typical software development lifecycle.
Excellent. Love it, love it. So Marcus, is it too early to let Tom loose on us here? Can we let Tom show some of the folks what we're doing, what we're talking about?
No, nobody wants to hear me talk, so let's have Tom.
Oh no, I'm sure there's some family members and friends who want to hear from you.
No, I think a picture says 1,000 words, and in this case, a demo even more. So Tom, take it away, and we can come back with any questions.
All right, gentlemen. Absolutely. Sounds good. So thank you much, Marcus. Appreciate it. Teeing it up perfectly. And a real huge congratulations for the release of this product. It's been really, really stellar to work with. So for this demo, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a marketing director who manages large marketing events. This individual had a flash of inspiration about how they can revolutionize the way they do work, but they're not yet a citizen developer, not yet a low coder. So to get started, they're going to dive into their company's newly established citizen development program and take advantage of one of ServiceNow's new innovations, which is this app intake form. So our low-code developer in the making here, Carla Humble, only has to outline a couple of key fields here to start thinking like a low coder. So she can actually walk through some of the things that a more experienced citizen developer might consider as they begin their development process, such as Does my app require access to sensitive data? Will I need information from other departments and so on? So it really structures the way new users get access to low-code tools, but it also massively simplifies the life of administrators. So you can see, as Marcus mentioned right there, that's all she has to do. It's all kind of on rails for her. But as we switch over to App Engine Management Center, you can now see this new admin perspective. This gives our admins everything they need to manage and govern low-code application development at scale, including the ability to handle app intake requests like we just saw, collaboration requests for either applications that are in progress or already in production, handle deployment requests of new applications, or even those that need a revision, and then manage a flexible deployment pipeline. So let's take a look at the first component here, which is that app intake portion. And what you'll see here is our admins have access to all the details stemming from that app intake form we just saw. This is great because it gives admins an opportunity to interact with these citizen developers before they start developing. So if they want to maybe suggest one of our cool templates, or they want to connect a low coder together with maybe a pro developer because the project sounds really compelling, they can do so here. But regardless of the case, once they vet this citizen developer, they can go ahead and press approve, and it's going to trigger an automatic workflow that will give that individual access to our low-code tools and send them a handy little email. So that email is going to be the start of their journey. And from there, they can hop right into our flagship low-code development environment, App Engine Studio. So you saw this, I think it was like a year ago, Alan. This gives our low-code developers an opportunity to manage every aspect of their low-code project, stemming from or going from the data model to the end user experience, spanning logic and automation, even incorporating our automation engine portfolio. But what's awesome about this tool is it gives them an opportunity to collaborate with others as well. So let's say Carla's not quite comfortable with some of the more complex integrations she needs her app to perform. She can go ahead and just outline an individual that she's heard of or that she has already connected with, outline the kind of permission she wants them to have to her application, and send them a collaboration invite. Maybe she wants a visual designer to help her create a really compelling mobile application. She can go ahead and provide them the appropriate permissions there as well. And these folks will have access to just the aspect of the app that they're there to address. With that, she's ready to submit. All she has to do is press the submit button. And as Marcus said as well, they don't have to worry about the complicated DevOps practices behind the scenes, but they do get visibility into the journey that their application is going to take on its way to production. So a really simple way to give them just enough information to keep them in the loop, keep them knowing what's going on, but all they have to do is provide some release notes. So we scroll down here, just enter a couple of release notes. And with that, our citizen developer, Carla Humble, can wipe her hands and say, all right, cool. It's in the hands of the admins now. So what this does is creates a deployment request. So if we go ahead and come back over to App Engine Management Center, we can address both that deployment request and those collaboration requests that she just created as well. If I hop right in here, you're going to see we have two new deployment requests for this application, two new collaboration requests. And this gives our admins, once again, an ability to prevent sprawl, prevent access to complex apps for folks that may not necessarily need access. You can see in the collaboration request, we have the permissions that are going to be granted along with the person that's coming in. So very, very easy way to facilitate collaboration in a citizen development program. And then if we go to the really cool part, the deployment request, we have a fully integrated CI/CD process in a fashion that makes it super streamlined for admins. So we have all the details of the application. They can perform all the vetting and validation they need. When they're ready to push it to test, all they need to do is press approve. This is automatically going to transition all of the content of that application into the test instance. And what's more is that this integrates tightly with our automated test framework and instance scan. So as soon as this is completed in terms of migration and validation in the test instance, all the details from those scans are going to be available for full traceability to our admins. Scroll back up here, when they're ready to push it to stage, it's the exact same process. They go through an approval and vetting process here. They can even collaborate with other admins if they want to evaluate particular aspects of the app. And when it's ready, all they need to do is press approve to transition it to the next instance. So we can go ahead and approve it one more time. And this will take us all the way from development to production with just a couple of clicks. So really, really fantastic way to streamline the management of applications. We have a couple of areas where you can get access to all the details. So this is there to provide full logs and traceability. And what's more is that we have a flexible pipeline configuration that allows this to work with any company right out of the box. So if it's just a dev and a prod instance in your company, it can work with you right out of the gate. If you have a more complicated setup with maybe 5 instances or maybe multiple deployment pipelines, it's going to work with you as well. And it can grow with you as you scale your citizen development program. So as you can see, App Engine Management Center provides a streamlined way for admins to manage every aspect of low-code app development and truly govern citizen development at scale. So with that, Marcus and Alan, back to you.
Yeah, good stuff, Tom. That was a great demo.
Yeah, much obliged. Thank you.
Hope our folks at home were able to see that well. So Marcus, let me come back to you. Look, the last 2.5 years with COVID, we've seen sort of rapid, no pun intended, rapid development of the whole low-code, no-code space, right? This is, I mean, it's exploding, right? Everyone's talking about low-code, no-code. I want to talk to you about the market and the term citizen developer. I got my head handed, maybe it was another part of my body handed to me. I was on a panel, I guess a couple months ago now, and I was, talking about the term citizen developer using low-code, no-code tools. And this person, it was a woman, this person got rather upset with me because she said that, real low-code, no-code tools are meant to make the life of a developer easier. Citizen developers are not really developers. And in spite of advances that we see like you showed us here, Tom, citizen developers are basically, playing with toys. It is in essence what she said. And that low-code, no-code was really about making tools for developers. And this whole citizen developer thing is a red herring that we're all going to come to regret. Now, I look at what you're doing here. This is a beautiful interface. You don't have to be a code jockey to develop stuff using this, right? It's not a toy. You could, you get deployment in it. Marcus, I'm going to ask you to pick up the shield for the citizen developer community and set us straight.
Yeah, so Alan, first, the thing I would say is the artists of this century are digital artists and they are developers. And the reality is everybody can be an innovator, everybody can be a creator, but there is an extreme amount of skill when you are, a full-fledged pro developer, when your job is to come in and put your art into work with, applications or software that's helping the lives of your coworkers or your people or this planet. You are that artist of the 21st century. And that is our mission here at ServiceNow and App Engine. We want to enable developers of all skill sets to be able to innovate. And guess what? Pro developers use our low and no code tools. They're like, hey, I don't want to instantiate a database and start writing a bunch of, SQL to create a table and set up a notification and write a notification server and service. They just simply use declarative tools to get a bunch of that very, very easily. And guess what? We have applications, critical business critical applications that run hundreds of billions of dollars of essentially claims for one customer of ours, Fortune 10 company, and it was built using App Engine and no low-code tools, right? The reality, though, is during COVID, especially during COVID, that's been this big adrenaline shot in everyone's arm, is all of us were at home. And we were empowered to solve our own problems because we didn't have somebody to go to. We couldn't sit in a room and figure it out and whiteboard and so forth. So we were empowered to make that change ourselves. And what organizations have seen is incredible value from using no low-code tools and putting it in the hands of the person who is closest to the problem. And who is that? That's the line of business who understands their process, their workflow, pain points, their bottlenecks better than anyone. And so they've been able to, you know what, become a little bit of an artist themselves. Is it in the same way? Are they, writing the same sort of, complexity as a real developer? No. But development, including citizen development, is a team sport. And it's actually the initiatives of low code and citizen development that's bringing these silos together and breaking down those walls, because what they're doing, they're phoning a friend. They're like, I don't know how to integrate to that critical ERP system that I have zero access to. Help me out, developer. And guess what the developer does? They come in, they use App Engine and Integration Hub, and they say, hey, I'm going to create a reusable connector that connect to the data you have access to. And you can use that for not only this application, but other use cases for yourself. And now what we have is an up-leveling of knowledge and skill set across the organization. And now everyone's a little bit of an artist. And I'll tell you, as someone who can't draw stick figures, and my kids will attest to it, this is how we actually innovate together. And that's actually what's so critical about having something like App Engine Management Center. Because when you're trying to do this at scale, if you're a centralized app dev team or IT, all of a sudden everyone's coming to you with this innovation. They're saying, hey, here you go. They're like, whoa, wait, hold on. Because if you're new to software, you don't realize the biggest cost of software is maintaining it. It's not necessarily building it. And so with App Engine Management Center, now the organization can have the guardrails and the governance and the insight, not all the way through that value chain, right? All the way from concept of this application idea to delivery, to maintenance, to support and seeing what's usage and what's happening in that application, all in one place. Now they can have what they need to say, hey, guess what? No, you don't have access to our financial data in our ERP or SAP system. Oh yeah, you want a quick connector to do Teams, or you want to fit into certain security patterns, because we've seen some low-code platforms allow for sensitive corporate information to get out in the wild. That is really where App Engine Management Center sits. Allows everyone to still be empowered, allows everyone to innovate together, by the way, again, team sport, and do that with transparency, do that with collaboration, do that with visibility, and do it with governance that allows that innovation to really be scaled. Because we know what happens the first time somebody drives off a cliff. All of a sudden, nobody else can drive anymore. And that is exactly what our mission is, to, again, empower developers of all skill sets to innovate on ServiceNow.
Love it. Great defense, Marcus. Great points. Hey, we're running low on time. Release is out. It was released yesterday. Where can people go get information and dive in deeper?
Well, we always point our developer community, whether you're no code all the way to pro code, to developer.servicenow.com. We have a lot of great material on App Engine Management Center, on App Engine, training, of course, videos. Our release notes are always a great and fun place to look. And one other thing I'll just throw out right here is, Alan, what you saw today is the productization of that citizen DevOps at scale. We know that when you're running these initiatives, you also need best practices and change management and culture change, really, within the organization. Guess what? We also release that too with what we call the Citizen Developer COE, which helps anyone really establish a citizen developer program at scale. So that's a great microsite that we've created. You can get to it from developer.servicenow.com or from our release notes. And it's a great place to bring the best practices of citizen development with a platform and a productization that helps you do that at scale with App Engine and App Engine Management Center.
Very cool. Guys, Marcus, Tom, thank you both for coming on here and introducing us to this great new release today. Best of luck and success with it. Come back and keep us posted, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you much, Alan.
All righty, Marcus Torres, Tom Freeman from ServiceNow. on the App Engine workflows, citizen developers. Go check it out. That's developer.servicenow.com, right? No S.
That's right.
Developer.servicenow.com. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong. We'll be back in just a moment.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Good stuff there for the low-code, no-code crowd. Continuing news around services now released. Next up, we have Jeff Hausman. Jeff is the SVP and General Manager for Operations Management Portfolio at ServiceNow, and he's joined by Chad Corriveau. Chad, again, is going to give us a little demo, a little background information on the May quarterly store launch for Service Operations Workspace. There's some real game-changing kind of stuff here, the way they've put it together. I tell you the truth, I was blown away with what Jeff and Chad showed us. I think you will be too. Let's have a look.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome now to our another segment today on Techstrong TV, along with our friends from ServiceNow. In this segment, I'm happy to have joining me my friend Jeff Hausman and Chad Corriveau. If I mispronounced it, I apologize. Chad, correct me.
Corriveau, it was all good, Alan.
Corriveau. Chad Corriveau. Got it. Chad, welcome for thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Guys,
sir.
before we get started, let me just get out of the way titles and so forth. Chad, since I mangled your name, I'm going to let you go first. Why don't you give people your title?
You're all good. I am, so Chad Corriveau, Technical Marketing Manager here at ServiceNow. Been around for about 8 years, so it's a true pleasure, Alan.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you on. Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Absolutely, Alan. So I'm the Senior Vice President of what we call the Operations Management Portfolio, which is really about helping our customers get the best outcome around running and delivering services, and there are a variety of different aspects of that. So excited to be here today and share the new news that we just announced.
Absolutely. And for those watching, it came out yesterday. You know, the big announcement from ServiceNow, number of product releases, innovations. But Jeff, you know it better than I. Tell, if you don't mind, share with the audience, what do we have?
Sure. The big announcement for us in this arena that we are describing and calling service operations is in helping people digitally transform and be more effective. We're introducing a whole new experience. So, Alan, we're helping our customers bring together what have been disparate, challenging, siloed set of capabilities, solutions, interfaces into something we're calling the Service Operations Workspace.
Very cool. Service Operations Workspace. And, so when we look behind the covers here, you're really kind of breaking down silos internally at ServiceNow based upon how people are working in real life today. These silos are being broken down at their workplace, and ServiceNow is breaking them down in the way the products work together and are organized.
Absolutely, Alan.
Yeah.
When you think about historically, there's been a lot of situations where the service management team, the operations management teams, they are distinct. They're operating independently. And that has caused some, frustration and challenges over time. If you think about it, when they're running separately, you have different siloed approaches and tools. You're not necessarily scaling and being able to handle the types of requests, understanding what's happening on both sides to be able to either predict problems and prevent them or address them more quickly. And what does that lead to? It leads to frustrated users, whether those are employees or customers. It leads to inconsistency and poor execution that limits productivity and frankly limits efficiency and outcome and the delivery of innovation and running the business that our customers need to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let's talk, and Chad, you're going to give us a little demo and show us a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Let's let Jeff, if you don't mind, let's let Chad do that, and then we'll come back and discuss a little bit. Sounds
Absolutely.
good?
Yeah.
Sounds
Chad,
beautiful. Yeah.
why don't you take it away then?
All right, sounds good. So Jeff really teed this up. This is a great story. And Alan, Jeff, I'm really excited to show what is coming out. So Service Operations Workspace, as Jeff mentioned, it's siloed. And what I'd like to do is demo a couple of different personas here, starting off with the service desk. So Jeff mentioned that there's silos, different KPIs, different focuses. And so Service Operations Workspace really just brings this all together. And so we're starting off in this dark view. Why am I starting off in a dark view during the day? Well, it's really to show that Service Operations Workspace is highly configurable for any agent, any team, right? So we can see displays, accessibility, workspaces. That can be all configured to suit the needs of our agent or our team. As I drop into Lakshmi's service desk, right, we're looking at overviews, incidents assigned to her, task SLAs. So everything is specific to her needs. It's configured. And really what Jeff mentioned before, really not wasting any time looking for information. It's all dynamic. And we can see announcements, upcoming events. And this becomes her center of excellence, right? So we can see one thing is on hold. This came in from a virtual agent. What's great, we even have at-a-glance details. So we can see what's on hold, where it came from. But this is where the rubber starts to hit the road for this service desk team. So we can see overviews, right? So the affected CIs, the impacted service. And this is where ServiceNow's special sauce comes in. We are the platform of platforms, in my opinion. And this is what it's showing right here. We see the affected CIs. We see the classes. We see the activity, right? In the details, in the past, our agents and teams would manually be putting this information in here. We can see very clearly this came in from caller Storm. And in our activity stream, we can see that the information came in from a virtual agent. So we have virtual agents on the front end. Again, addressing what Jeff said before, we have employees that get frustrated, right? But this automatically gets routed. And now our Lakshmi, our agent, can really start digging into this information, like the related records. Why is this important? Well, we can see assignment groups. So again, the platform is providing the information that our team needs. So let's go back to the overviews. Going back to this main page, what I really want to talk about is, Jeff touched on this, is AI service operations. And this is where ServiceNow starts to shine. So we can see the recommendations here. This is asking Lakshmi to propose a major incident, but she's going to dig into this a little more. Even cooler, she's got historical recommendations around what happened in the past around AI and machine learning. Even cooler, agent assist. So this is something that we released a couple of releases ago, being bubbled up into this next experience, this new UI, this new UX, right? Even cooler, now she's not digging across knowledge bases, looking through various incidents, calling that friend, right, that has the tribal knowledge, picking up the phone. Everything is in a single workspace. And then you start bringing in other teams, other service desk agents. So in this case, we can start linking incidents, right? And so going back to Jeff's point, really being proactive in pulling in other service agents, right? So it looks like similar to what's going on. Now we can create this as a parent incident. What happens here is now we're starting to bring in other service desk agents to triage on this specific event. Also, we saw there was an additional customer-facing message going out. So that will go out to the customer saying that we're working on a bigger fix, right? Also, we see that Agent Assist can show outages, articles, right? So again, not looking across knowledge bases, we can go ahead and mark that as helpful. Again, helping the back end, knowledge management strategies, but also attaching this. And now all the teams that have been bubbled up into the same record can start using this temporary workaround. Even cooler, I mentioned the front end agent. So we had a Storm who submitted this, right? And we're looking at MS Teams. So again, ServiceNow is not the only game in town, but we are the platform of platforms. So we really play nice with other third-party collaboration apps. And many of our customers use MS Teams. And so what we see here, Storm is on the mobile app, gets that information, none of that information is deprecated in any way and can start leveraging it. So I mentioned the rubber hitting the road. We can propose this as a major incident, and we're going to rally all the troops, bring them all together. But what's even cooler, what we released as of yesterday, experts on call. So subject matter experts, because we pull that information from the classes, the assignment groups, and we can see Amelia Bryant, our operations team, coming to save the day. We can go ahead and contact them and look at, we're pulled into MS Teams. If you notice in MS Teams, all that information has been seamlessly brought in. Now we're breaking that silo. We have our service desk team and Amelia Bryant working together to really start to triage this bigger event. So those silos are being broken down. So this is a good place to jump off into operations management. So we can see Amelia, she's sharing some of the information from her service maps and all that. So guess what? This team was already in front of this event even before the service desk agents were getting that. So that's the predict and prevent part of this, right? Because we have to think about timelines. This is part of the silo issue, right? They're going to be on different timelines. But Service Operations Workspace really brings this together. And look at how beautiful this is for the operations team. Again, specific information to Amelia Bryant. We see alerts assigned to her, assigned team alerts. So all that is being brought in thanks to machine learning and AI. But it gets even better. We have the event management dashboards. We brought this in, very clear, very, very beautiful looking dashboard. We can see what's going on. We can see there's an issue with order status. We can start to filter in on this. We can see at a glance details. And again, Alan, as we look at this, it's specific to the operations team's needs, right? So Jeff mentioned this. They have different KPIs. They have different needs. And so Service Operations Workspace really starts to deliver. Even cooler, filtering by alerts, all that information using AI and machine learning again. But where the rubber starts to hit the road is really the predict and prevent part. HLA, right? Health log analytics, anomaly detection. So this is AI ops in focus. We can see it's already identified the issue. There's a spike in total volume logs. We can see that anomaly. And even cooler, the recommendations to the right are more specific to Amelia's needs, right? So we can see she can look at the insights, get some of that information, and start to leverage the in-app playbooks, right? So what are those playbooks? Well, that becomes the remediation process. So it kicks off this remediation. We can see determining the user impact. We can notify the business. And again, we're not swivel chairing. We're not going to different consoles. Everything is being done here, and it's being hit by those other teams. So remediation is a process. She expanded that disk space. Everything looks good. Everything is green. So this part of the operations is successful, but we still needed to clean up what happened on the service desk. So again, Amelia, and these timelines would shift, but Amelia and Lakshmi would be working on this. They get that information. They share the information. We see they close down the MS Teams video chat. All that information is captured. But again, the platform provides, we see all that information has been captured in the activity stream. Why is this important? Future fixes, audibility, anything around this particular event. So we can go ahead and close this out. ITOM was already working on a bigger fix. We can post those comments, gets disseminated to the various teams. We go ahead and resolve that. This resolution process for the service desk team ends up kicking off a different set of events, right? So the workaround was provided. ITOM team was already working on a bigger event, and look at in the Now mobile app that you've seen in the past, Storm gets that notification. You've been resolved. And that is Service Operations Workspace in a nutshell. It's beautiful.
Wow.
And I think, Alan, if I may, what you just saw, what Chad just showed is the power of how you can bring things together. I mean, we are with service operations, we're changing the level, if you will, of capabilities. We've always had a common platform that helps us to facilitate cross workflow operations, et cetera. Now we're helping our customers further accelerate digital transformation. We're helping them focus on their business, delivering more services and capabilities and innovation, doing it more efficiently with high resiliency and experience. We have, as you know, we have thousands of customers who get tremendous reduction in time to find root cause or resolve an issue and ideally prevent problems. Organizations who, when they're running and managing service desks, they're able to drive dramatic improvement in the workload to actually deliver those services, right? And drive better satisfaction scores for their employees and their customers who are on these platforms. It really is just, it is game changing for us. And I think the other thing I'd say is, we're really trying to help with service operations generate great experiences, great innovation, and do so in a way that we're also generating savings that allow our customers to plow that back into what I'll call innovation dollars. Ultimately, CIOs are looking to be an accelerant and drive the business, and that's what this is all about.
I mean, I'm looking at this though, thinking to myself, this looks 7 generations in. You know what I mean? For a product where you just started breaking down these silos, did a damn good job of busting those silos. I mean, it is thought out not to the next step, but to 4 steps further down the road, and that is, that's maturity. You don't usually see this early on in a product cycle. On my watch anyway. But so congratulations, man. This is a killer. This is a real these are the kinds of things where people are like, man, I want that. Sign me up. Let's talk about that though, Jeff, for people who want it. How do they get it?
Oh, look, it's available now. We are excited, and we already have a number of customers that have been working through this. To your point on this, looks like it's got a lot of thought behind it. We've been partnering with customers for years and years, and are always taking their feedback on how we can help make things better for them now and anticipate where they're going. But absolutely, reach out to your favorite rep from us or any of us within the organization. We'd be happy to make sure that our customers are taking advantage of this. The big thing, Alan, now is just making sure that people are leveraging it and going and getting the value, realizing the promise.
Absolutely. Hey, we're over time. I unfortunately need to pop off. For people who want to go dig in more, they like what they saw from Chad, the demo, where can they go within ServiceNow to get this, to take not just to get it, but to take a better look, a deeper look?
Yeah, if you come to any of the ServiceNow pages, you look for service operations. We have a wealth of assets, including demonstrations such as Chad described, more materials if you're interested. So absolutely, should be very straightforward to find all of this information.
Guys, great job, man. Not only the two of you on today's show, thank you for that, but a great job to the whole ServiceNow team on this product. This looks like a real winner. Thanks for coming on. Chad, thank you for the demo. Jeff, always a pleasure. I hope to see you soon. And we're going to take a break here on Techstrong. We'll be back in a moment.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
So our Techstrong Women video series has really kind of found its audience, and we're glad to have it here. Charlene O'Hanlon, our Chief Operations COO, is a co-host along with Tracy Bannon, and Tracy's a contractor with MITRE as well as just a unique personality on her own. So Charlene and Tracy have, I think is now episode 5 of Techstrong Women. This is actually a part 2 of a previous episode they started around generational diversity, and they are joined by their guests Nashida Henry of Deloitte and Beth Ann Bygum of Axicom. And I think, when we talk about the whole diversity thing, generational diversity certainly plays in it. As someone who, has been around the block a few times, I see a tremendous generational diversity in the tech industry, as well as other forms of diversity and gender and race and so forth. So this is a great part 2. Let's now go to Charlene and Tracy.
Hey everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV and another episode of Tech Strong Women. I'm so very excited to be here today and with my amazing lineup of guests. I do want to record them, or not record them. I do want to introduce them. But before we do get started, I want to welcome my co-host, Tracy Bannon. Thank you so much for joining me, as always. Great to see you.
Thank you, Charlene. It's always fun.
So our guests today are two very established, very, very smart and very, very wonderful women to talk to. First of all, we've got Nishita Henry, who is the U.S. Consulting Chief Innovation Officer over at Deloitte. And then we have Beth Ann Bygum, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Security and Compliance Officer over at Axiom. I think that's how it's pronounced. Nishita and Beth Ann, thank you both for joining me today, joining Tracy and me. I appreciate it. I'm sure Tracy does as well. So thank you. Thank you both for being here. Want to talk to you guys about how your journey, basically. We want to celebrate, which is the focus of Tech Strong Women, is really celebrating the successes of females and basically all humans in IT, but really emphasizing the path that females have traveled as they have climbed up the ranks. And so we're interested in talking to you about any number of things that you believe have helped you along your way, whether it's mentoring, whether it's communication, whether it's non-traditional career roles, whether it's recognizing and understanding issues such as generational diversity. We can talk about, and we probably will talk about a number of topics. But first, I want to throw it over to Tracy, see if she's got any opening remarks, and then maybe she can kind of kick off the conversation.
Yeah, less opening remarks and more about jumping straight into talking about, hopefully Jody has the bleep button for me, but we're going to talk to a couple of badasses right now. I've known Nishita for a number of years, having worked together at Deloitte. And Nishita, first of all, congratulations on this continued climb. Now that you are leading innovation, I've got to know, are you in a chief futurist type role, or are you mentoring and bringing along groups that are bringing you ideas? Talk a little bit about what that role is.
Yeah, innovation means different things to different people, different organizations. And when I took the role of Chief Innovation Officer here, the first order of business was defining what it meant to Deloitte. And for us, it's all about how do we transform ourselves from a purely professional services organization to one that is professional services meets solutions, assets, and products, so that we're combining IQ plus IP. And how do we do that as an organization, partnering with, the current tech software providers, with startups, with VCs, with other corporations? How do we do it in a way that transforms our culture to be one of product mindset and product engineering? And then how do we scale those businesses, especially at a time where the market for services is booming? Right? No better time to transform yourselves when things are going well, but it's also very hard because it's the innovator's dilemma of how do you keep the ship running and moving along and capturing the current market while preparing for a new one. So it's really all about the entire life cycle of ideating and incubating, testing, scaling, and launching new businesses for Deloitte.
And that's particularly difficult and I'm seeing this day to day, is having the amazing investment and I mean human investment in the innovation side of it, and giving people the grace to be allowed to experiment and to have successes and things that are not as successful. And then the transition of that great idea, operationalizing that great idea, that's a huge divide between those two. How are you starting to branch that when you have these amazing new capabilities or technology sets? How are you taking those and actually starting to operationalize against them?
Yeah, so part of it is how do we do things in a way that we can do it fast and quick, fail fast and succeed, right, and in scale. And so we're creating kind of a incubator concept. We call it Deloitte Catalyst, where we have partnered, right? We have a core, which we of a business, and we have the edge, which I call ourselves, right? So new business innovation is kind of at the edge. We're separated from the core practice, but we're integrated with them in a way that we don't do projects or we don't take on new ideation without the core in partnership. So we've partnered with them in order to ideate at industry intersections, right? So at Deloitte, our depth is really understanding sectors, industries, and our clients' missions across business, people, and technology. And so we really want to understand what are the gaps in the market? What are the challenges that we see our clients facing? What are things that our competitors are doing and what are they not doing? And so what do we actually pull together in terms of solutions? Ideate and protect that at the edge for some time until we can actually get a few wins under our belt. We can demonstrate traction. We can demonstrate a vision and a full roadmap. And then we can say, let's actually invest in this like a Series N business, right? We upfront give it seed money. And then we say, let's actually go big. Let's do multi-year investment. Let's make sure, we have a set of payback metrics that we want for that investment. Let's make sure we're not unduly burdening it with surrounding administration so it can flourish. And so it operationalizes itself once we've provided a Series N investment in order for us to actually create a long-term and large solution. And then once we say we've scaled it, right? We have certain metrics for when it reaches scale and when we think it's ready to kind of fly on its own, right? It graduates, right, from our NBI ecosystem into the network as another offering. Right, as another solution that we're actually just taking to market like everything else we do. And so we try to show that full life cycle where we protect it at the edge for some time, we're integrating with the core, and then we're spinning it out.
I love it. So it's get that first success, sustain that success at that small, and make sure you've got the scaffolding before you start to scale. It sounds like you have a pretty decent ecosystem flowing for that, going from smaller to larger. Beth Ann, when I think about your background and how far you're scaling with the different things that you're doing, do you have to take kind of a similar mindset in that approach to starting small, being protective, and then scaling things out?
Oh, without a doubt. The threat landscape and changes in regulatory expectations as it relates to hygiene, when you're talking about the management of data and the protection of data, is pivoting at a tremendous speed that we'd never seen before. We knew this was coming, right? We've been forecasting change in technology and getting ready for whether or not you want to believe it's called the Web3 or next gen compute. We know that the ability to defend is at the code level. We are there, and organizations that are not revamping their security strategy and or the investment strategy that has to couple a protection strategy is really an organization that's just not necessarily preparing for that future. So on a very similar track for sure. I was reading an article the other day, and I think we're at the place where everything that teams develop, that work on, everything's a product. So Nishita, to your point, if we're not thinking product first, product strategy, and then how do you protect and respond to any kind of expectations related to those products, we're not necessarily preparing ourselves to be scalable, to be profitable, and then, as always, to meet any expectation from the regulatory lens.
The change from project to product, that word, I think we're going to see that, and not as a hype, but as a real thing, with doubling down on product.
Yeah, I agree. And I hear that all the time, and it's almost reached buzzword status, but there's still some real meat on that bone there. So, but I'm interested in finding out from the both of you guys, how you guys got started. And is this something, did you take a direct path to where you are, or is this something that, 10, 15 years ago, you've never thought that this would be something that you would have achieved? Nishita, why don't we start with you? What is your background and how did you kind of get to where you are today?
Yeah, it's always a funny question when people ask me that. I'm like, you can plan all you want, but life happens, right? Exactly. I graduated with an undergrad in electrical engineering. At the time, I thought I wanted to be really super techie, and I interned at some of those kind of, product companies. But I realized I also really loved the art of problem solving. And I loved working with people in order to have technology solve business problems. And so, that's why I really love consulting. It allows me to do both of those things. And I really started out on the professional services track. And whether it was advising CIOs, implementing large scale, systems, modernizing and transforming, taking mainframes and putting, applications in the cloud, implementing new customer experience systems, transforming, people's experiences from a user perspective. Did a lot of that type of work all throughout my early career. And as I grew in terms of management roles, I always saw myself as growing in a professional services realm, right? Whether I'm leading an offering or a capability or leading a sector or an industry kind of go-to-market space. And about 3 years ago, our CEO then said, "Hey, Nishita, I have a great idea." And I was like, "Okay, what's this great idea?" Like, "We want you to come be the chief innovation officer." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, what is that? I don't know what that means. I don't know what that person does. Are you trying to get rid of me?" And it was really funny because when someone takes you off the path you thought you were on or asks you to do something different, you question it. You're like, "I don't understand. Like, I thought I was doing really well here." And what I learned is new opportunities come from different directions all the time, and making yourself open to that can lead to a lot of great things, right? I developed a whole new network. My network was mostly in our government practice. I'm now kind of over, our entire practice, which is our commercial and our government practice. My network grew immensely. My knowledge of the market grew immensely. My skills as a leader grew from being a very, direction-based leader to being a very influence-based leader. My external network grew. And so I can say that it's been a wonderful experience on all fronts. And I've just had a lot of fun, right? I've had fun developing a new part of our business, developing new skills, creating a new leadership team. And so I always say, be open to those new things that aren't always in your line of sight as to where you planned your career, what you thought you'd be doing, because you never know where it may lead.
So definitely not Oh, go ahead, Charlene.
I was just going to say, it's really interesting that your reaction was, "Oh my God, am I going to get fired?" Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that's kind of our default. We always feel like, and I'm generalizing here, but I feel the same way whenever, life throws me a curveball and it's actually an opportunity. Mm-hmm. My first inclination is to think, "Oh my God, I've screwed up. I've done something wrong. I'm not perfect for this job," or whatever, when it's actually, a real step forward. But I don't think that is the same mindset that we see, happen with men when they are offered these opportunities. A lot of times they actually do look at them as opportunities. I'm wondering, am I wrong?
You mean that we default to off-ramp mentality? Is this an off-ramp? No, it's an interchange. Is this an off-ramp? No, it's an interchange. I'd be interested, Beth Ann, what your thoughts are on that, because you are in a field that traditionally has been hyper male dominated, right? Security, cyber was the male thing. We had women technologists, but we're seeing a boom in the cyber area. Talk a little bit about that for you when somebody gave you that next job, that next role.
Tracy, the sponsors that have been helping shape and groom the career are really, people that I thank and I appreciate. But, at the end of the day, it was the ability to understand the value that I bring to the table that is what allowed me to successfully gain the position where I am today. And the ability to say that with a certain level of confidence is not from a place of ego. I am supported by an amazing team that teach me on a daily basis. But I think as women, we have to get to a place where we're comfortable with being able to articulate the contribution that we bring at a business level. So when I have a conversation with my leaders, I go straight to the value proposition that I bring to the organization and the contributions that I have helped shape and or contribute either from a risk reduction or offset perspective, or right now what I'm working on is helping to drive opportunities that are directly related to revenue. I mean, when you look at the threat landscape, security is, out of all the lines of business, security is the enabler that will facilitate a frictionless ecosystem. And I can't really take that quote because my sponsor, who I trained under many years ago, that was his whole focus. And so I think as human beings, not just women, maybe predominantly for us because of historic practice, but putting that aside, I have just, at a certain point in the juncture, just become comfortable with just stating, this is a business conversation. I am a brand. I bring value to the organization. We'll have this conversation from that point of reference, and we'll negotiate from that point of reference. I think what was interesting over the course of my journey was I would seek out positions or opportunities where they were failing. I wanted to be the person that jumped in and solved it. So I would stand up and take the problems because at the end of the day, I knew that, number one, I would grow from that opportunity, but most of all, it was an accomplishment that no one could take away from me. So I always seek out the problems because that's how we grow.
So you're a fire jumper, and I appreciate that. I had my opportunities to be that fire jumper in a number of situations. There's a dumpster fire. Here's your parachute. We'll see you later, Bannon. But you bring up something really important. I'd like to tease out just a little bit more. Both of you have actually mentioned that you had to know your ability and had to be able to state your value. Beth Ann, I want to ask you, was there a point, an inflection point, where you really had to become introspective and say, okay, this is my value. I know my value, and kind of change your own personal narrative as you went forward?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and it was even more compelling because I entered the cybersecurity space from a non-traditional route. When you look at a chief security officer, you usually see three archetypes. They're either, prior military, prior intel, prior tech, heavy tech, or audit. The on-ramp that you mentioned earlier, I on-ramped via the audit / risk space. But I think it was very quickly, working with internal audit after a couple of findings when I realized we are defending at the code level. And that's, there's these junctures, and maybe it's the on and off ramp, Tracy, that you are using as an analogy, where you find out you've got the right skill, you're just not using the right narrative, or you're not using the right language, or you're not using the right terminology. So you take a slight pivot on terms, language, you surround yourself with people that speak the right terms, and then you start to assimilate using that, right? And then all of a sudden you're able to break through, not because you were missing any capability, but you just weren't narrating with the right, people weren't recognizing what you were saying because you used the wrong narrative, right?
And how about you, Nishita? Anytime I've ever spoken to you, I always felt like you had every one of the words nailed down from the very beginning. But as I go through my journey, I'm assuming that other women, other folks are going through a similar journey of being able to really clearly articulate their value and really be able to state it. Did you go through, I find it hard to believe, but did you go through, yes, I've got a girl crush. No, tell me, did you go through that as well? Was there a point where you took a step back and said, yeah, I started out as an electrical engineer, and now I'm X?
It's interesting. I have always focused on the work I'm doing versus who I am. And maybe that's right or wrong. It's just always been more about how do I make what I'm doing successful, and what do I bring to enable that to be successful, whether it's my tech chops or whether it's my people skills or whether it's my understanding of the business and market. And different problems require different parts of that skill set to come through.
Yeah.
I will say there have been parts of my career, like everybody's, where you doubt your own skill in a space because you're like, do I have the right tech chops? Do I know enough about this? Does that person know more than me? And I think part of it is learning in this job and in technology, everybody's always learning. The world is always changing underneath us. And so no one person knows everything. It's all about how do you assimilate information and learn new things. Two, it's around, hey, if someone on the team didn't believe I had those tech chops, because there have been situations in my earlier career where I'd be put in a really technical role and there'd be people there like, what is she doing here? She can't possibly have that technology. Whether or not it was unconscious bias because I was a woman, whether they didn't know my background, I have no idea, right? But in those instances, I think it was important to have the right sponsors around me that knew that I had the chops and could support me when I wasn't in the room. And I think it was me just doubling down my efforts and demonstrating my skills. So I think it was two of those things. And then as you gain more and more experiences across your career, you define yourselves and your value in many different ways, right? So I don't know that I have one thing that defines me. I would say when people come and ask me to get things done is because they know that I can bring people along the journey. I can communicate effectively, and I'm a driver. I go and get things done, right? And so that's actually how I define myself more than a content value, because I think that changes with every project or thing I'm working on. I don't know if that made sense, Tracy.
Oh, it does. It does. Someone once said to me, don't worry about your value proposition. Don't worry about that. Worry about driving success. And that's actually what I've heard both you and Beth Ann say was Beth Ann's fire jumping. You're taking on other challenges. It's get in there, but you had enough faith in yourself or that you could turn around and bring others along that were going to be able to stand with you and help you get towards that success. So,
yeah, Nishita, you also mentioned sponsors, having the right sponsors, people backing you up. How important did you see that along your career path? I mean, were they, without them, you'd be nothing, or is it more they were the ones who kind of provided the stepping stones, if you will, and the leg up here and there to get you where you are today, and so that you can then hopefully pay it forward for the next generation?
Yeah, I absolutely, credit a lot to the sponsors I had and the mentors and the coaches along the way. I do believe they provided stepping stones. I do believe, when I wasn't in the room, they were advocating for me. I do believe they positioned me for certain jobs I may not have even thought I was ready for, right? I mean, I wouldn't have even thought to ask to do this chief innovation officer role if it wasn't for some of my sponsors, right? I wouldn't have thought to have kind of even, thought I was ready and gone up for partner if it wasn't my sponsor saying, you're ready. I know that you can do this, and I am in the room talking about how you are experienced and qualified to do the job, right? And so I absolutely believe that sponsorship is a huge element of it. And then taking that sponsorship and then using it and launching it and proving yourself out from it, right? And not letting it scare you in such a way that, oh, you have, this like something to live up to, but more as though someone's given you an opportunity that you should capitalize on, right? And so that's how I viewed that. And I believe, like you just said, Charlene, I have an obligation and a desire to continue to pay that forward as we sponsor others, and to make sure that we are sponsoring people who don't always have the same background as us, don't always look like us, that didn't come from the same schools or the same education or the same personal situations, right? And so being cognizant of that, I think, is incredibly important, because I know I wouldn't be here if people didn't say that too, right? Because a lot of my sponsors, frankly, were white men who truly believed in my capability and my, promise for being a leader that enabled me to be here, even though I didn't look like them. I didn't come from the same place they did. And so I think it's important for me to make sure I'm doing the same thing.
What about you, Beth Ann? Have you experienced kind of the same thing vis-a-vis sponsors or mentors, or however you like to label it? It seems to be such an important element in just succeeding and knowing where you fit in an organization that you might not obviously see right away. It's not an obvious thing to you. So how much has it actually played a role in your career?
Well, I always had a balance between mentors and coaches. So I just want to start there. I think sometimes people have a misnomer that one or two coaches, one or two mentors. There isn't one person that's going to sort of balance out or round out some of the skills and competencies that you need to develop and then demonstrate as you're moving through your career. So you will find that you constantly are maybe partnering with different people to develop that skill. But from a sponsorship perspective, I can't emphasize more, that role is so important, especially as it relates to ensuring visibility as you progress through those different upper roles. And it's important to not it's important to not assume what that sponsor, what he or she will look like, because you just never know who is going to identify the strength and the competencies and the skills that you bring to the table. So it's important to be open-minded. It's important to look, and it's important to have, Nishita, to your point, constantly having conversations with people, because you just never know who will be your sponsor.
That's true. And I've had conversations with people who I never thought would have my back, per se. And a lot of times it almost seemed like a trial by fire. I was butting heads with somebody over and over and over again. And it turned out they were just testing me. They wanted to see, they wanted me to prove my mettle. And then once I did that in their eyes, then they felt that I was capable of taking my career so much farther. So you're absolutely right. The people, the mentors and sponsors come in so many different packages, if you will. I'm curious to know, Beth Ann and Nishita, the sponsors that you have today, are they the same ones that you had at the beginning of your career or even mid-career? How's that changed?
It's funny. I almost said no, but then I'm thinking about it. The sponsors who ensured the progression earlier in my career still function in a way as sponsoring and supporting me, but slightly different than the direct sponsors who are helping me today. So maybe it's an evolution for sure.
I found for myself that it is an evolution. Those folks who might have been mentors to me before oftentimes are friends and more peer-like in ways as they've helped me grow. I've been talking to a young woman in particular and giving her the guidance that it's okay for mentors to change over time. It's okay for sponsors to change over time. There are seasons to those relationships, and some will be lifelong and others will be for a window, and that's great. And there is no right or wrong with that. Nishita, would you agree with that? Disagree with that? I thought I had a little head shake there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the other thing that's interesting as you advance in your career is you get to a level where your peers become coaches and mentors and sponsors, because you are all at a level in your organizations that you are the leaders, right? And they're always leaders in different places and different parts, but a lot of them are your peers and you work with them every day in different ways. And being open to peer feedback, peer coaching, peer mentorship, I think is incredibly important. And that has been so helpful for me all the way throughout my career, in addition to the formal and informal kind of leader mentee situations. From a sponsorship perspective, I do believe that does change over time because your network grows and changes over time. And so you'd want to see that happen. It doesn't mean the ones you had before aren't there now, but they are maybe in different roles in different ways. They sponsor you than the ones you currently have in your circle. So I think there are some that will consistently follow and some that will change over time. And I also, I always tell folks, sometimes you have to look at it as kind of who's your own personal board of directors, right? And there's different members of that board that play different coaching roles, right? Whether that's a professional coaching role and maybe it's a leadership style versus a content thing or versus a network thing, versus somebody like personally who's helping you manage work and life, who is, helping you manage, traveling and thinking and providing you different tips on how do you deal with your teenage girls who just want to argue with you every day, right? So like, it's it's I look at it as a very integrated board that can sometimes help on both sides and sometimes on one. And it's not always just about work. We are whole people. We come as whole people to work every day, and we need coaching on all sides of life.
I agree 100%. And I believe that mentoring and coaching is as much about life skills as it is about, career. So because we do, even though we say we don't, everybody brings their work home and home to work. And, if things are not good at home, it's not going to be good at work. And so if you've got somebody who can kind of help walk you through some of the issues that you're having and put some perspective around things, whether it is a work situation or a home situation, it helps tremendously. And whether that's, you consider your mentor being, your Tuesday night wine club or something like that, it's anybody who can kind of help you get through and process information in a way that is, a positive. I would firmly put those types of people in my mentor bucket any day of the week, because they sometimes can give me more than somebody here in my office sometimes. But, I'm interested because, you both of you do see the value of mentors and sponsors. What would you guys say would be the best piece of advice that you ever received from somebody, whether it was a mentor, a sponsor, or even a coworker? Nishita, you have any thoughts on that? You want to think about it?
Yeah, no, I have a couple of thoughts. There was one thing as I was, continuing to grow in my career. It's funny. Someone said to me, Nishita, there's a time in your life where you spend a lot of time to save a little money. And then it changes. And there's a time where you spend a lot of money to save a little time. And as a child of immigrants, spending money was a big deal to me, right? Regardless of what I made, it was just like, oh my gosh, no, I can clean my house. No, I can do my lawn. No, I can take care of this and that and the other thing. And I realized that was such a freeing concept that said, you know what, I've earned the right to pay for things so that I can use my time in much more impactful ways for my kids and for my family and for my job. And so that tiny little piece of advice truly gave me so much freedom that I didn't know I needed. And that enabled me to be more at peace with paying for help, asking for help, and taking that help.
I'm wondering if the same person who said that to you was the person who said that to me, because it has been freeing.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. It was very freeing. And to say to my husband, baby, it's okay. I think it's okay if we outsource this part of what we're doing, because this is where we want to focus. My husband actually had to go on that journey with me. So it was not just telling me that, it was both of us like, but I can do that better. Yes, we can do that. And let's let somebody else. Let's go ahead and do that. So, Beth Ann, how's your connection doing? Because we've got a question for you. Can you hear us?
I am back. Yes.
Okay. So we had asked Nishita, and we'd love to hear from you. Is there a piece of advice that is just at the top of the list? You could look back and say that one really altered the course of how I evaluate things.
I think there's three. The first one was when I was in college, and I had a professor who said to me, you get once in life to prepare, and then you're on. Right. And so that comment has really shaped my thought process in my career over the years, because sometimes you're in the midst of a battle, or you're in the midst of something that's just extremely painful. But then when you think about it, that this is my time to prepare, your thoughts around what you're going through and why you're going through it and how to view it all of a sudden change. And then you realize that this is a point in time. The time is going to be over soon. I need to sort of draw from the experience what I need for the next chapter. The second one is more of a parable, which leads to a saying that I think sticks with me. It's a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands, and poverty will come my way. And it's really more around staying diligent. And I remember I was in a security conference one year, and an executive was talking about the shift in economic powers as we watch different countries. And his saying was, we sometimes lose our position because we don't remain hungry. We have to stay hungry. And when we are not, when we lose that foundational component, we lose our drive, we lose our focus, we lose that. So I think between, always looking at every opportunity as a time to prepare, coupling that with staying hungry, are two things that are constantly, with me. Now my team would probably say I need to take a vacation, but whatever.
I think we all could use a vacation, but I'm interested. One of the things that I did mention at the top of the hour was generational diversity, and something that a lot of organizations are grappling with these days. And what you just said, Beth Ann, really kind of strikes me, because there are different ways of working between generations, and so something such as staying hungry and having that drive may not resonate well with millennials or even Gen Z. So how have you been able to kind of reconcile the way you work with others on your team who are of a younger generation, who maybe don't have that level of, or at least that maybe overtly have that level of drive? And how do you make that work regardless?
Well, the first thing I realized a couple of years ago is I needed reverse mentoring, which I did. It's funny, Tracy, when we started the call, we were talking about different. I'm an 80s, right? I am super 80s, right? And shoulder pads, whatever. And so I had to acknowledge the fact that I needed reverse mentoring. And through that journey with the generation, one or two generations, what I found is they actually are hungry. It's just what they're hungry for is different, right? And then tapping into what motivates them versus what motivates me, total different dynamic, but they're still motivated, right? And so the diversity, so making sure I have a rounded approach to looking at their diverse thought process and what motivates them, what they drive for, has helped change me. I still think there's areas where I will constantly, tip into their, and rely on their insights, but they really focus more on the working smarter versus harder. I think the 80s was a little bit different, but I think the balance has really been very helpful for me.
I generally don't see them sleeping under the desk quite as often. I'm just going to put that out there.
I was going to say, I think in the 80s, we're all kind of MacGyvered. We all just kind of did what had to be done to make sure something worked correctly. So yeah, we do tend to work harder. And I would agree that there's a certain level of intelligence, collective intelligence around working today with those kids and their rock and roll music and
those pesky children. Those pesky children.
Get off my lawn. So.
That's right.
Nishita, what about you? I feel as though, especially in Deloitte, you have a very, very diverse employee base, and I imagine you've got a lot of different age groups who are working with you, alongside you, or under you. How have you been able to deal with this, and it may not even be an issue at all, but is it something that you have recognized and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a very, generally young workforce, a ton of millennials. And I mean, millennials are 40 now, the Gen Zers, right? The Gen Xers are kind of the ones at the leadership at the firm. Like
there are new leaders, right?
It's kind of crazy.
The millennials are becoming leaders too. Like, wait a minute.
How did this happen? All of a sudden we're the adults in the room. Like, it's kind of scary. But I will will say I agree with Beth Ann. Different things motivate different people, and different things motivate the younger generation. And I think there's also so much more happening in our external environment than was happening when we were growing up, right?
Sure.
I mean, just the last 2 years of change, of, you got COVID, you've got, the Black Lives Matter and the civil rights issues. You've got now a geopolitical situation and a war happening.
Me too.
There's just so many external factors impacting everyone's psyche that it makes it different for people, right? And then you've got the economic pressures of inflation and high real estate prices, and younger folks not being able to afford certain things, and so money becomes an even more motivating factor than it might have been for us when we were growing up. Yes, money is motivating for everybody, but in a different way. And so we see people jumping more and more for small increment, what look like to us as small increments of pay versus the long-term potential. And that's what we're all grappling with in this quote unquote, great resignation and movement of people and talent. And it's happening so quickly. And I really do wonder, and Beth Ann, I'd love to hear what you have to say on this too, right? Is like, over the long run, how is this going to affect society, right? And what happens to those people who job hopped 10, 15 times over the course of the last, 5 years versus the people who stuck with it? The jury's still out, right? We're the stick with it people. I've been with Deloitte 17 years. I had 2 jobs before that, but then I found something, I got it, and I ran with it. And you just don't see that happening at scale anymore. And so I don't know what's going to happen, but I do think it has societal impacts.
Yeah, I agree. I think I believe the initial wave of impact we're going to see is the lack of ability to problem solve based on historical, context. I mean, we're seeing that now. Mm-hmm. There's rapid approaches to address issues, but if there were more context, the way we solve things would be slightly different. But I do agree. Overall, the verdict is out for sure.
Ladies, our time is growing very short. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you, and thank you. I commit to every one of these conversations. And Charlene will tell you that I always walk away with my note cards of things that I've learned today. So thank you for giving me some mentoring points, some things to noodle on.
Such an 80s thing, those note cards.
These are Rocketbook, and I can erase them and I can upload them with the QR code into
I didn't
the cloud.
say I don't do it, but okay. I was just pointing it out.
I'm trying to modernize. Just give it to me. Just give it to me. But
I'll let you have
and Beth Ann, thank you so much for being with us today, and Charlene, as always, for engaging with me in these wonderful sparring contests, and really trying to elevate the conversation. And for everybody who has been on the broadcast today, we hope that you've enjoyed Tech Strong Women. We will be broadcasting this and other ongoing episodes, continuing to look at how we can elevate women who have done incredible things in technology. They're technologists first, and they're bringing others along with them. And with that, thank you for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, for something old today, we're going to go back to our Secure Software Summit, and we're going to show you a presentation Steve Springett did called Behold the SBOM, Practical and Strategic Advice for Making SBOM Work for You. Look, SBOM, supply chain security is a really hot topic, but this is also a good time to remember that almost all of our virtual events are available on demand. All of the presentations are there. You can check them out, including this one now from Steve.
Hi, and thank you for coming to this talk. I'm truly honored to be presenting along with all the other talented and respected individuals at the conference today. So thanks for attending. This talk is entitled Behold, the S-Bomb, Practical and Strategic Advice for Making S-Bombs Work for You. Quick introduction before we dive in. My name is Steve Springett. I am the leader of the OWASP Dependency Track Project. It's a project specifically designed to consume and analyze software bill of materials. I'm also the chair of the Cyclone DX Core Working Group, which is a software bill of materials format. I'm the leader and co-author of the OWASP Software Component Verification Standard, which allows organizations to measure and improve their software supply chain assurance. I'm one of the contributors to the package URL specification, which is really good at identifying or having an identifier for open source components. And I participate in multiple transparency working groups for the federal government. What I actually get paid to do is software security architecture at ServiceNow. So before we dive in, let's just level set what is an S-bomb, right? At a very elementary level, this is what it is, right? It is a list of ingredients. Now, in this particular example, this is an energy bar, right? And the idea here is that if I am allergic to, say, peanuts, well, this provides me a way to make really informed risk-based decisions. So S-bomb is kind of like that, except for software at its really fundamental level. Now, there's some really great talks, some recent talks. There was one at KubeCon that I would highly encourage everyone to take a look at. It's both entertaining and informative. So check that out if you haven't checked out this talk before. One of the primary reasons why we're talking about S-bombs, however, is for vulnerability management use cases. A lot of software companies are not exactly are very opaque in the types of components that they ship in their software, and the executive order 140.028 kind of mandates S-bombs for all federal government purchases, right? So a lot of the reasons why we're talking about this is for vulnerability management purposes. And with that in mind, many of the technical requirements for the executive order was shifted over to NIST. However, NTIA, or one of the sister agencies of NIST, was responsible for describing what the minimum elements of an S-bomb are. And this is essentially what they are. You have a supplier name, the component and version, right? Maybe a few other unique identifiers, dependency relationships, timestamp, and who authored the S-bomb. Really, really minimum fields. However, minimum fields equals minimum benefit. Now, keep in mind that this is the minimum elements, not of all S-bombs, just S-bombs going to the federal government. Capitalism has a tendency to kind of flesh things out a little bit more. So from a purchasing or M&A perspective, I would expect most companies to demand a lot more in their software bill of materials than just the minimum elements. I know I do when I procure software or when I buy a company. So minimum fields, minimal benefit, but what else should you care about? Well, there's a lot of different things that you probably should care about. And we'll dive into very, very briefly what these things are. First one is authenticity. In other words, did somebody actually create this component, right? And is it digitally signed, for example? There's a lot of different use cases around authenticity that you can describe in an S-bomb, right? Especially for very complex component assemblies where you might actually get a component that includes other components from a different supplier, and then you digitally sign that and then include that in your overall inventory of the S-bomb. There's all kinds of authenticity requirements or use cases that you can do with an S-bomb. Integrity verification. Well, what is integrity? That could be a lot of different things, right? There's a lot of security use cases for both authenticity. There's a lot of security use cases for integrity. In this particular case, I'm referring to, has something been tampered with? Has a component within your inventory been tampered with? Has the SBOM itself been tampered with, right? Is it the same as what I expect? Now, services also are really, really important in a bill of materials, right? Software does not live in a vacuum. It hasn't lived in a vacuum for 2 decades, right? Software calls out to the internet. It phones home to update or provide some kind of service to you, whether it's a desktop application, server, IoT appliance. Many software calls out to the internet. And those services are absolutely part of the inventory. And I care about these services. Now, vulnerability remediation is also really important. And I'll give you a good example of this, and a really recent example, actually. H2 is a very widely used embedded database platform, right? It's written in Java, but it's used by millions of organizations. Now, recently, there have been a string of high severity vulnerabilities against H2. Now, the project has a history of not actually backporting security fixes, right? You have to upgrade to the latest version, as is a lot of open source projects. However, the latest version has breaking changes. Therefore, organizations are forced to choose between, do I break my application and nothing works, or take the risk of having a high severity vulnerability that somebody may or may not exploit? Well, guess what? The vulnerable component is actually the least risk. So organizations, at least responsible organizations, are now backporting their own security fixes to remediate otherwise vulnerable components. And your SBOM should absolutely be able to describe this. Now, your inventory of components also should be able to describe, do those components have any security advisories against them, right? Whether it's, Red Hat security advisories or JBoss or, whatever the case is, right? Your inventory is more static in nature, but your vulnerability information is going to be very dynamic, right? It's very fluid. It's going to change all the time. And there's several different advisory formats in existence. CSAF out of Oasis is certainly one of them. It should be ratified in the next couple of months. Version 2 is really what they're striving for. Cyclone DX is also an advisory format, and there are a few others as well. Being able to describe what the vulnerabilities are in a given piece of software is also kind of important, right? If I have a piece of enterprise software, if I'm a consumer of that, I want to know what those vulnerabilities are. And that can be decoupled from an SBOM, but it's a complementary artifact to the SBOM. Now, this one is really, really important. How complete is the SBOM, right? Do I have the complete inventory of components? Do I have the complete dependency tree? Do I have the complete inventory of services, right? These are all things that I can describe in an SBOM. Pedigree. Now, pedigree, this refers to the DNA, right? What is the makeup of this particular component, right? Especially for modified components, I might start out with an original component like that H2 example. I make my modifications. I can describe what that pedigree is, right? I can describe what were my changes, what were my commits, what were my diffs, what was my original component, who made them, and why. What security issues am I actually fixing with this thing that I'm now creating, right? This derivative of H2. I can describe that in an SBOM. Provenance. Provenance is also really important. This is a story of origin. And provenance could refer to a lot of different things. For example, it could refer to the repository in which I obtained a component from. It could refer to the country of origin of that component. It could refer to a given supplier or manufacturer of a component. And finally, security isn't the only use case, right? There are other non-security use cases, for example, license compliance. That is important. And of course, there are many, many more use cases for software bill of materials. So in this talk, we're going to be focusing on some of the ways that you can create SBOMs and some of the benefits and drawbacks of the varying approaches. And there's more than one approach to creation of SBOMs. In fact, there's many, and there's probably many, many more that are not on this slide. And we're going to go through these a little bit at a time. One of the easiest ways, I think, to create an SBOM is using your existing SCA tools. Now, SCA, or software composition analysis, is an entire category of products. It's recognized by the market research firms, and there are many commercial and open source options available. This is probably the easiest on-ramp to creating software bill of materials. The vendors and the commercial tools and the open source tools in this space, many of which already produce SBOMs today, the ones that don't certainly will be in the future. So if your vendor does not support SBOMs or the SBOM format of your choice, talk to that vendor, right? It's in their best interest to support it. Build lifecycle integration. And notice I didn't say build integration, and that's on purpose. Every build, especially for things like Maven or NPM, they have a given life cycle, right? Your build goes through a series of phases. And at different phases of the build lifecycle, your dependency graph and your component inventory is actually going to change. So it's really important, I think, to be part of that build lifecycle. In my experience, being part of that build lifecycle as opposed to external of that lifecycle yields the most accurate and comprehensive inventory and dependency graph that you can create. For example, Maven has different phases of its build lifecycle, and your test dependencies, for example, are not actually resolved early on in the lifecycle. Likewise, you have things post build, for example, using the Maven assembly plugin, right? That could add additional components or strip components away. So being part of that life cycle is really important. Another example is NPM, right? Your lock file is a strong suggestion, essentially, but your lock file does have a way of lying to you. One lifecycle thing that I like to call out on NPM specifically is really about distribution models, right? If you are distributing something to a web browser, are you really using everything in that lock file? No, of course not. You're going through something like Webpack that's going to strip 2/3 of all those components out, leaving you something that's much smaller, that's much more easy to send to a web browser, and of course, faster for that web browser to interpret. So being part of that build lifecycle is really important if you want to produce an accurate bill of material. Source, you can describe just the source files as well, right? Not a whole lot of security use cases for this. There are a few, but mostly this is for license and intellectual property use cases. Now, one of the, I think, biggest examples of source SBOMs was the Kubernetes project. That was their original SBOM that they created. So congratulations on the Kubernetes project for doing it. Not overly useful for vulnerability management use cases, however. Hopefully they've corrected it since then. I personally haven't had a chance to look. But again, knowing what your target audience expects from your SBOM is kind of going to lead you to one of these various methods. This one is really, really interesting. So you can create SBOMs at runtime using IAST tools or using mobile tools, for example. This is really interesting because you might have an agent running on your app server, whether it's a Java app server, .NET, Chrome V8, whatever the case is. You can actually create these SBOMs dynamically, not only of the software components, but of the services that those components reach out to. So you get a more comprehensive view of your inventory with this approach, which I find really, really interesting. The same tactics can actually be used for mobile apps as well, both iOS and Android. Build factory integration. This one is really interesting because it allows you to target thousands of builds at the same time, right? If you're using something like Circle CI or Jenkins or GitHub Actions, right, you can target it at the factory level itself. Therefore, all of your builds using the factory will then be able to produce SBOMs. Will they be accurate? Will they be exactly what you want? Maybe, or maybe not, right? You might actually have to go that one step further in actually integrating into the build lifecycle itself. But build factory integration is a really easy way to be able to scale up producing SBOMs, within your enterprise. And finally, hopefully nobody has to do this, but manual authoring is a thing, especially for languages like C and C++, which for the most part, haven't really taken advantage of best practices or package management options that have been available to them for well over a decade, right? Many C and C++ projects continue to manually manage their dependencies, manually make modifications to those dependencies, and are now expecting automation to solve their SBOM problems. It's not, right? You have to manually also author your SBOMs, unfortunately. So the reason we bring all this stuff up is that you choose the format and the approach that is really right for you, because we don't want you to be this person. And finally, garbage in, garbage out. This should be very self-explanatory, right? You start with some good data, and you target the audience and what they expect for the SBOM. That way, you really have the most useful information in that SBOM for the consumer of that SBOM. So we're going to take a few moments and talk about Cyclone DX. Cyclone DX is a bill of materials standard, and we're going to talk a little bit about it and how it kind of relates to some of these things that we just talked about. Real quick, and there's a lot of data on this slide, so I apologize for the information overload, but I think this gives you a really interesting overview of the capabilities of the standard, right? If you look at the components, right, there's a lot of different components that we can describe, from applications and libraries and frameworks to operating systems, firmware, and even hardware devices, right? So Cyclone DX can handle a lot of different use cases. Services, because again, software doesn't live in a vacuum, right? It communicates to the outside world, so we can describe what those services are, who the providers are, what the data classifications and the directional flow of data, and trust boundary traversals, and any authentication requirements as well. Dependency relationships are obviously part of that, not only for the software components, but for the services as well. So if you have a component that relies on another service, you can describe that dependency relationship. Likewise, if you have, for example, a microservice architecture and you want to describe a microservice's dependency on another microservice, that's fully supported use case as well. Compositions, this is really how complete the SBOM is, right? Vulnerabilities, this is for a lot of security use cases, obviously, but being able to support advisory use cases and being able to support something called VEX, which is what we'll talk about in just a bit. And there's a lot of ways that you can customize or use Cyclone DX outside of the capabilities of the core spec. But SBOM itself is interesting, but SBOM itself is a crawl behavior. If we're looking at crawl, walk, run type of analogies, SBOM is really a crawl behavior. And the minimum elements that we described earlier on, that's kind of the equivalent of, maybe a toddler or a baby lifting its head for the very first time, right? But SBOM is just one of many, many things that we as security professionals should actually care about. So SBOM, as we've been talking about, is really about the inventory of my components and optionally my services as well, right? But there's other kinds of bill of materials. For example, operational bill of materials. OBOMs is actually a BSIM behavior, right? There's lots of organizations actually doing OBOMs today. And how OBOMs differ from SBOMs, imagine this. Imagine you get a piece of software for a vendor, whether it's a commercial vendor, maybe it's an open source project, doesn't really matter. It's an SBOM. And now you deploy it somewhere, right? You deploy it to an operating system, you deploy it to a container, you deploy it to a Java app server, right? Well, that deployment actually has its own bill of materials, right? It has an operating system. It might actually have a Java servlet container, and that Java servlet container might actually overwrite the dependencies of your SBOM, which is a supported use case, right? So now your OBOM actually can affect your SBOM in terms of the effective inventory that's in play at runtime. So OBOM is very, very important. Manufacturing bill of materials. This is really for hardware devices, right? In the physical world, they have lots of different bill of material types. In fact, they have the bill of material types for procurement or procurement bill of materials, right? What is the bill of materials of what I need to buy? They have engineering bill of materials or EBOMs. These are things that might contain CAD drawings and other things that go into the design of a particular thing. Then, of course, you have MBOMs or manufacturing bill of materials. This is really the end product, right? What is the as-built thing, including optionally all the packaging material around that thing. In addition, it might also contain the formulation or the recipe for how that thing was built. So MBOM is a thing within the physical device arena. In the cybersecurity world, we incorrectly refer to this a lot of times as HBOM or hardware bill of material, but in reality, it really is an MBOM. SaaS bombs. SaaS bombs are in fact a thing, and it's been supported by CycloneDX for several years now. In fact, there's multiple commercial and open source tools that actually support SaaS bombs. And what SaaS bombs are essentially bill of materials that describe nothing but your services, right? There's no software components in there. It's just your services. And where this really is beneficial is complementing things like infrastructure as code, right? Infrastructure as code really describes the layout, right? How things are laid out in your virtualized infrastructure. Your SaaS bomb actually describes the consumption of those services, right? So it's a very complementary type of logical representation of these services that others might consume. And your services, of course, can consume other services and be part of that dependency graph. And your SaaS bombs, for every single service in your SaaS bombs, every service can then refer to its corresponding SBOM. So you get this whole holistic view of your services and a logical view of that, as well as your bill of materials or your software bill of materials for every single service within your SaaS bomb. So this is a supported use case, and it's formally recommended by the Cloud Security Alliance. VEX is a really interesting use case. Now, CycloneDX supports advisories, right? It is actually an advisory format as well. VEX is actually the anti-advisory format, if you will. So advisories are going to tell you what something is vulnerable to, right? I might have that H2 thing, for example, that H2 database, and it has a bunch of advisories against it, right? This is true. But the VEX will tell me if I'm using H2, for example, and I have some mitigating controls, or maybe the code is just not reachable for whatever reason, I can actually describe in a VEX or vulnerability exploitability exchange that my application might actually be using this vulnerable component, but because of mitigating controls or whatever the case is, my application isn't actually vulnerable to that component. Now, depending on who you talk to, between 80 and 90% of open source components that are vulnerable are not necessarily exploitable, right? And that's really a key benefit of VEX. So it's going to tell you what something is not vulnerable to. And of course, there's many other types of bill of material things that you can do with CycloneDX. Now, it is in use in production at an estimated 100,000 organizations. So we've been doing this for several years now, starting back in 2017. But we estimate based on the number of downloads of all the different Cyclone DX tools, of all the security vendor support that this format has, as well as the millions of downloads of OWASP Dependency Track, which is a platform dedicated to the consumption and analysis of Cyclone DX SBOMs. We estimate that there's around 100,000 organizations doing this today. Now that's an interesting number, because 100,000 says, to me anyway, that this is real, right? People are operationalizing this stuff today, and there are tools and to produce the SBOMs, and there are tools to consume and analyze them, right? Lots of folks are using this today. But in relation to the millions of organizations that exist, it's still a relatively small number. So this is really the call to action, right? Teaching you a little bit about SBOMs, and hopefully you'll have a little bit more information to go back to your respective organizations and put that on the roadmap for hopefully this year, right? The Cyclone DX website does have a lot of use cases for what it can, the format can be used for. We're not going to go into all of them, but I highly encourage you to check out the website. There's examples in both JSON as well as XML that I invite you to take a look at. We also have, and it's not on the slide, we also have in our GitHub repository, we also have a SBOMs examples repository, and it has examples for SBOMs, SASBOMs, OBOMs, VEX, MBOMs. There's examples for all of these different use cases in our GitHub repo. So take a look at that as well. The Cyclone DX Tool Center, I think we are up to close to 100 different tools. These are just the tools that are known. There's, in reality, there's certainly over 100 tools that out there that support the standard. But again, no matter what you're looking for, there's probably a tool out there to do it. For example, if you are in the Go ecosystem, there's not just one, there's multiple choices to choose from. So not just the Cyclone DX tools, but there's other vendors' tools also supporting Go that you can use. So there's a lot of choice in the Cyclone DX ecosystem. Right now, we're focusing on some of the more obscure things like R, right? Not overly popular, but still really, really useful. So we're targeting some of the lesser known languages as well. And if your language or ecosystem is not supported, understanding and creating a fully compliant Cyclone DX implementation is actually really simple. It's not hard. Most people can read the spec, understand the spec, and implement the spec in about a day, right? It's not overly difficult. Here's some links for community participation that I encourage you to check out. Our website, obviously, our GitHub repo that I was mentioning, take a look at that. Again, there was that SBOM/examples that contains all the different examples for the various types of bill of materials. We do have a pretty vibrant Slack community, so take a look at that as well. The invite is in the slide here. Cyclone DX is a flagship OWASP project. However, for historical reasons and for just the sheer number of channels that we have a separate Slack workspace outside of the OWASP. So if you are on the OWASP Slack workspace, just know that the Cyclone DX channels are independent of the OWASP channels. We do have a mailing list, right? We have a lot of our friends in the federal government, for example, that typically cannot access Slack for various reasons. So we do have a mailing list. We use Groups.io for that currently. And we have a couple links for our socials as well. So LinkedIn as well as Twitter. And we highly encourage you to take advantage of these social aspects as well, because we want to hear your success stories, right? We want to hear what works and, more importantly, what doesn't work. So take advantage of our LinkedIn, our Twitter, and of course our Slack workspace to provide some feedback. And more importantly, if you're interested in this kind of standard, right, get involved, right? Anyone within the community can participate in any of the OWASP projects, including Cyclone DX. So if you're interested in this kind of content, this kind of standard, highly encourage you to get involved as well. So with that, I thank you so much for attending. Hopefully this was beneficial to you, and have a great rest of your day.
Up next is Charlene, who's going to first do some news headlines of the day. And then Charlene's interview today is with Keith Breen, Director of Cyber Threat Research at Immersive Labs. You know, Immersive has been around a bit, and they recently launched their inaugural Cyber Workforce Benchmark Report. And this provides a look into the cyber skills, knowledge, and preparedness of organizations across industries, government, retail, healthcare, etc. Charlene and Keith are going to discuss, or they do discuss, some of the key findings here. Good report. Let's now go to Charlene and Keith.
Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at GraphQL and its security implications. The GraphQL query language is an excellent tool for increasing the ease of data sharing. The premise is that you request the fields you need in a single bundled request, avoiding multiple network calls. Due to its usability, GraphQL is a growing area of development. Yet, as with any new technology, it comes with caveats. REST APIs function as a request and response paradigm in which the receiver accesses one resource at a time. On the other hand, GraphQL exposes many fields at once, requiring additional rate limiting and timeouts to avoid nefarious queries. Additionally, the ability to traverse the entire schema could be abused by attackers to expose intricate data linkages. There are also some usability features with GraphQL that could be abused if misconfigured. This article delves into the many security implications of GraphQL and some steps organizations can take to limit the impact of these risks. And we look at DevSecOps and securing CI/CD pipelines. Many companies are adopting a DevOps approach in their workflows as IT moves toward a more automated and cloud-native world. But for some industries, this migration isn't easy. Many of these companies in finance, healthcare, government are obligated to meet compliance requirements. For these organizations, DevSecOps adds necessary security focus to the DevOps methodology. Compliance means adhering to certain standards and controls to ensure that applications are secure. But compliance only goes so far. How many applications contain third-party dependencies inside? And how expensive would it be for a company in the financial industry, for example, to fail to meet compliance standards? This article goes pretty deep into the technologies and processes that can foster a healthier security environment in DevOps and application development. All right, in news, Red Hat has announced general availability of a managed instance of the Red Hat Ansible automation platform on the Microsoft Azure cloud, which makes it possible to deploy the control plane for Ansible on the Microsoft Azure cloud as an alternative to AWS or an on-premises IT environment. Version 2.2 of the Ansible automation platform also previews support for content signing technology that automatically validates content to improve overall security. The managed service enables IT teams to take advantage of integrated Microsoft billing, excuse me, in addition to the latest features and content provided for the platform and other capabilities that have been added to optimize Microsoft Azure environments. Excuse me again. On Container Journal, Platform 9 has expanded the reach of its Kubernetes managed service offerings to now include support for a revamped integrated development environment and an instance of the Argo continuous delivery platform. The goal is to make it easier for IT teams to spend more time building applications rather than managing the underlying infrastructure by managing a SaaS environment maintained by Platform 9. Previously, Platform 9 had limited the scope of its managed services portfolio to Kubernetes clusters. However, as organizations start to build and deploy a wider range of cloud-native applications, many of them are now looking to an external service provider to manage more than just the core Kubernetes cluster. As part of that effort, the user interface for the platform has been revamped to make these services more accessible to a wider range of developers and IT administrators. And finally, on Security Boulevard, we look at mobile devices and their potential as an attack vector for ransomware. The amount of damage that can be done by a ransomware attack against a network is well known. We've seen the stories about hospitals, universities, and governments taken offline, and the threats made to organizational and consumer information. The focus of ransomware, however, remains almost exclusively on network attacks. But the time has come, well, actually, the time has probably long passed, to look at securing mobile devices against ransomware. It's not the next attack vector for ransomware gangs. It's an attack vector they are all already using, but to which few are paying attention. This article looks into the results of a Checkpoint Mobile Security Report 2021, which found that almost every organization has encountered a mobile malware threat in 2020, and 4 in 10 mobile devices are vulnerable to cyber attacks. Also, nearly half had an employee download a malicious app. Lots of other takeaways in this report as well, so do check out this article. All right, that's it for the webinars, or sorry, for the headlines for today. Please check back with me on Monday when I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here with Kev Breen, who is the Director of Cyber Threat Research over at Immersive Labs. And Kev, welcome back to Techstrong TV. You just reminded me that you've been here with me before, and it is so great to have you back. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me back on. Always a pleasure.
Excellent, excellent. So let's talk a little bit about the Immersive Labs inaugural Cyber Workforce Benchmark Report. What did you guys take a look at with this report?
So we looked at about 18 months worth of data from usage across our platform. I have these numbers here, so to make sure I get these right. So 2,100 organizations, 500,000 exercises and simulations across 1,500 threats and incidents. So that's the data we're looking at. And what we did is we just benchmarked all of that. We have a team who crunched all those numbers for us, and what we looked at was like things like how quickly were people responding to new and emerging threats, how quickly were they getting their dev teams up to date, like in terms of application security, in terms of like red teams and defensive teams, how quickly were they able to bring themselves up in capability to respond to these threats, and then we broke that down across different verticals and different groups.
Wow, it sounds like a huge undertaking, and basically you guys were just out to kind of measure how well organizations can react to a cyber event. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it was exactly that. So just looking how well they could respond, or as the data shows, how poorly some people can respond. And then more than that, we actually provide some insight into why that might be. So we've got some behavioral psychologists who are well-versed in cyber, Beck and John, and they provide that insight as to why that might be the case. And then more importantly, how you can fix coming out the other side of that.
Really? That sounds like really fascinating information. And why did you guys kind of take this tack when we're in looking at cyber readiness? Because it sounds like it's much more than your straight up survey that just kind of measures people's attitudes and abilities to respond to a cyber event. But it sounds like you guys went a level or two deeper to actually understand the whys, and in addition to the whats.
Yeah, so we've seen like over the years, people like plenty of surveys that have pushed out like, how would you respond? Like, do you think you can respond? What we wanted to do was actually try and benchmark that, to measure that, to evidence that. So what we have is a range of practical simulations. So we drop people into like real world environments with the threats, with the data, and say, all right, prove to me you can or you can't, and then taking them into giving them vulnerable applications and saying, okay, this is vulnerable to very similar threats we're seeing in the wild. Can your developers patch this and resolve this, and how long will it take them to do that? And then wrapping all of that together with crisis simulations and going, all right, let's take it slightly up from the technical teams. Let's put this to your C-suite. Let's actually put them through an exercise where they're making decisions that we can record. So we've taken it from the user says they would to user has proven they can or cannot. And that's what we really wanted to do when we put this out, so we could like actually demonstrate those things and prove those things rather than making some assumptions based on what people say they would do.
Excellent, excellent. So what were some of the takeaways from the report that really surprised you?
I think there's a couple of takeaways. There's some that didn't surprise us, some we kind of expected to see. And I think one of those is how influential the media can be. So one of the measurements we took was like the time to develop skills. So from the moment in time we released something on a threat, which we tried to do within 24 to 48 hours, like how quickly were your teams able to do this? I think that average pushes out to something like about 90 something days at the most extreme, or the average. That changes significantly when the entire InfoSec and security community rallies around a topic. And we saw this really like poignantly with Log4j. Obviously, Log4j was a big thing that impacted like the entire, not just the security industry, but like the developer industry, like just everybody was impacted this. And when we saw that, we saw a big shift in how quickly people came to those, and especially in the application development world, where those timings were down to a very small number of days. And actually, we saw people doing that within hours of that content being available. So it shows that influence. And conversely, we also see where the media can sometimes hype a vulnerability. Okay. We see the same effect there, which like goes to show how the media has this big role, like not just the media, but like social media and like all of those like Twitter trends can have this big impact on how people choose what they want to go and do. And like I said, Beck and John have done some phenomenal work in looking at the human psychology behind why they go and do that kind of stuff.
Wow. And what else, what other some surprising or maybe not so surprising findings from the survey do you see kind of as maybe a bellwether, so something that we could kind of keep in our back pocket to measure against in the future?
So one of the interesting things we saw was in like crisis simulations. Like I said, a crisis simulation is kind of like a traditional tabletop exercise where you get your C-suite around, except we've got these big dynamic environments that they can run in. And what we saw was there was a big disparity between how frequently people would run these and how many people they would bring to the table. So we saw like the education sector ran very few of these on an annual basis, but they took significantly more people into them. So they had this diverse group of people in there, whereas other sectors would run them more frequently, but didn't bring as many people into the table. So those were two really interesting views that we got out. And actually what we should have is that balance in the middle. You should be running them with more people and more frequently.
And people from maybe even outside the security organization to kind of bring in a separate point of view, or is it, are we still looking at security being done by the security folks and really there's no kind of, no migration, if you will, out beyond security?
Yeah, so this is something that we push for, like massively. Like when you're talking about these incidents, you have to include more than just security teams. You've got to bring in like your legal teams, your marketing teams, and we are seeing a shift towards this. We are seeing, and whether it's because we're forcing them into it through these exercises or whether they naturally think that, but we are seeing the shift where people are starting to realize that this is a thing. And I think ransomware has been a plague that's affected us over the last few years. And I think that's really what's helped drive this, because the ransomware threat actors are so public with the way they do it. You have no choice but to talk to that. And things like supply chain compromises, like we saw with Kaseya, again, where they big impactful things, you can't not come out and talk about it. So I think organizations, especially large ones, are recognizing that actually like that strategy should involve exercising and working with not just our security teams, but more of the C-suite, more of the marketing, more of the legal to get that more rounded effect.
Do you see, or were there any findings from the study that points to a greater number of organizations actually implementing regular security training and security awareness programs in their organizations?
So we didn't really target that as part of the report. Obviously, we have a large number of organizations using the platform, and we can see those trends. I honestly, I wouldn't know. I don't know what that looks like. I don't have that number. I'm sorry.
It's okay. No. It's fine.
It's definitely like just anecdotally, we are seeing like this big shift to making sure that your technical teams are more up to date with these emerging threats, and like practical skill-based training is definitely forming a part of that.
And yeah, I find it really fascinating that that you guys are really looking as much into the psychological aspects of security awareness and how that can increase readiness in an organization. I think for so long, we kind of think of IT in general as kind of this non-emotional, non-human entity that, it's just something that we use. It's a tool, it's something, but we've got, IT has basically taken over our lives. And as such, we kind of need to think about all aspects of IT, including cybersecurity, from a much more personal perspective, because we do make it such a large part of our everyday existence. It really has to be approached these days with a much more, I don't want to say emotional, but certainly with a level of empathy, if you will, that perhaps we haven't really considered in the past. And understanding the psychology of people and how they interact with IT, I think is going to help us understand better how we can approach cybersecurity from a much more quote unquote personal standpoint. And I think once we do that, we'll be able to take cybersecurity efforts far more, than it has been in the past. And I'm wondering if, the report has kind of started to bear out some of that kind of more personal or personalization, if you will, of cybersecurity and our approach to cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And that was a big important thing for us when we came into like generating this report. We didn't just want it to be like a load of technical data. Like, it's humans that are behind this. And we talk about like human workforce and human cyber readiness and capability. And it's your people. Like, you can have all the tools in the world, but unless your people know how to use those, then like everything's going to work. And it's more than just, can your team use the tools? Like, as we go, like, it's a sad fact that within an organization's lifetime, they're going to have some kind of cyber incident, whether it's something big and grandiose like a ransomware extortion, or even if it's just like something small, like you're being probed and attacked, like you're going to have to do this. Right. And empowering and enabling your security teams to talk to your C-suite teams to have those really strong line of communications is important. And that's part of the reason we really wanted to dig into that as part of this benchmarking, your people are important. You do need them, not just the tools. And yeah, so there's a lot of key takeaways we take away from that, especially when we start talking about wicked problems. So where there is no right or wrong answer, you're picking the best of the worst. And that can play psychologically on people, especially if you're in this like fast evolving crisis, because sometimes they are a crisis, and that can play into stress and panic, and like there could be financial implications and legal implications. Figuring out how people respond, enabling them to practice and exercise this so they can anticipate what those will be were key takeaways from us as part of that. And we got some really insightful views from that as well.
Yeah, it sounds like, and it sounds like a great report. I think everybody should take a look at it. So, which leads me to my next question. Can folks take a look at the report? Is it freely available?
It is freely available. You can find it on immersivelabs.com, where we have the report in PDF format, and you can go ahead and download that and review all the data in there. We cover a few different sections. So when we talk about cybersecurity pros, so that's more of the technical teams. We talk about application development, looking at how quickly developers react. We look at the crisis simulations, looking at that C-suite. And then we benchmark and compare across the industries. And one really interesting thing that we do to close is we look at the future. So we run our Digital Cyber Academies, which is a reduced version of our platform, free for students and veterans and neurodiverse individuals. And we actually do some comparisons between how do they deal with emerging threats and tools and techniques versus how your current staff are doing it as well, seeing how the future, like the human pipeline, if you will, seeing how ready they are to come and step into these roles as well. So some really interesting takeaways across the board.
That's great. I love to hear that. And I definitely am going to check out the report myself. Kev, thanks so much for taking a couple minutes and walking me through some of the more important sections, results of the report. And, as always, thanks for being on Techstrong TV. I do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. I always tell you we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. I got 3 here that are coming up in the next week or so. So hopefully you will be able to mark your calendar and join us because these are going to be some good ones. The first one is called Applying the 2022 OSSRA Findings to Software Supply Chain Risk Management. This one is happening Tuesday, May 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This is, like I said, this is going to be a good one, folks. This one is sponsored by Synopsys. Now, according to the 2022 Open Source Security and Risk Analysis, or OSSRA report, the overwhelming majority of software development organizations are leveraging open source to build their applications. However, the scale of use creates a growing management challenge. While development and risk management teams scramble to patch vulnerabilities, decipher complex license terms governing obligations associated with the use of each open source component, and stay up to date with component versions, another consideration begs attention. How does this open source risk affect my software supply chain? So in this webinar, they'll be discussing what a software supply chain looks like, how open source introduces risk to a software supply chain, and how to apply the OSSRA findings to reduce your software supply chain risk. Good one. All right, the second one is called Shift Left Done Right. This one is happening Wednesday, May 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Checkpoint. In today's world, all major processes are automated: coding, build, testing, monitoring, deployment, and the compute layer. Servers come and go, and storage is allocated within minutes. The sheer complexity of keeping up with the pace of the entire software development lifecycle requires us to come up with a technology that can tame the complexity of security in such a rapidly changing tech world and enable more people to become security experts. So in this webinar, the folks at Checkpoint will discuss how organizations can shift security left while also making it technologically accessible. Another good one there. All right, the third one is called Defending Against Emerging Ransomware Threats. This one is happening Monday, May 23rd. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. As ransomware attacks and attackers become more sophisticated, cybercriminal gangs will rely less on broad-based attacks and more on remote code execution using malware design for specific targets. Cybercriminals who launch ransomware attacks are becoming much more efficient. So this editorial webinar features a lineup of all-star guests offering their perspective on the current security landscape and how ways in which organizations can best protect themselves against ransomware and other threats. Good stuff. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. Please check back with me next time. I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
All right. Up next, we have The View with Mike Vizard. View with Vizard. Mike, of course, is Chief Content Officer at Techstrong Group, and his guest today is Jason Schmidt, General Manager for Software Integrity Group at Synopsys. Synopsys recently acquired White Hat from NTT, and I think it's a great acquisition by the Synopsys team. And Mike and Jason are going to talk about how this will improve application security, not just for Synopsys customers, but really, how the whole industry is moving. It's a great interview here with Mike. Let's go to him now and Jason Schmidt.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Jason Schmidt as General Manager for the Software Integrity Group at Synopsys, and they just bought White Hat Security. And we're going to talk about what that means for everybody in terms of securing their software supply chains. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So what drove you to this acquisition? I think they were themselves acquired by NTT not too long ago, and now they're coming over to you guys. So how does 2 + 2 = 6 or better?
Yeah, the thing that makes them a great fit for us is we've focused for a while on putting together an end-to-end solution set for application security. So everything from strategic consulting to tools that automate every aspect of security testing to more kind of proactive risk management solutions to bring it all together. So when we had the opportunity through NTT's divestiture of White Hat Security to look at them, we saw a very clear complementary fit for what we were already working towards. and nice fit with in terms of the team, the technology, the customer base, and then the market. So we're pretty excited about it.
So will you continue to offer their products? Will they be folded into the portfolio? Have you guys figured out what's complementary and how does that look?
Yeah, we'll absolutely continue to offer their products. There's two key things that they've built over the years. One that is the foundation of the business for a very long time is their Sentinel platform, which is all about kind of continuous testing of web applications as a service. So, you might recall they're one of the pioneers in providing security testing as a service. So that core Sentinel platform is absolutely a major part of their business that will continue forward. And then there's new offerings that White Hat released, really probably 3-4 months ago around providing more self-service style of testing. So they call it a Vantage platform. So it's complementary to that testing as a service, more kind of developer focused or individual self-service security testing. So both of those technologies will fit very well with the portfolio that we've already put together.
You guys were early pioneers in shining a light on the need for more software security, better integrity of our software supply chains. As you look back at that now, I mean, no one issues ill will on anybody, but at the end of the day, is there a certain kind of, satisfaction maybe in how you're seeing the world kind of appreciate this space a little bit more than, say, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, in one respect, it feels like the attackers are continuing to outfox the people trying to protect applications, but at the same time, the complexity of apps has grown so enormously, and the pace of development is so rapid that it's no surprise, honestly, that there's such a changing and shifting threat landscape that it's difficult for most organizations to keep track of it and stay abreast of the threats. But even more so many more companies have become software oriented over the last 10 years, like mind-blowingly, that every company is a software company. And we like to say that software risk is business risk. So in a sense, it really makes it top of mind for people that even 3 or 4 years ago wouldn't even understand what application security is when they see household name companies begin to get breached at the software layer. It really, in some sense, makes it beneficial for people to see that there's a lot of return on investment in focusing on securing software, and that even though severe threats can be disruptive and expensive, they at least set the agenda properly and kind of prioritize the security attention where it can be most effective.
Do you think that security is going to shift further left, and then just how far left? Because when I talk to developers, a lot of them are kind of like, I didn't get out of bed to write something that was insecure, but I'm never going to be a full-fledged security expert. So how much do we need to shift responsibility left to the developer versus maybe just lean left and make it easier for them to build more secure applications without becoming a security expert?
Yeah, I believe the latter is definitely the case. Lean left is a great way to put it. There's a fallacy in shift left that you can completely put the security responsibility on development. Now, we have to acknowledge there's a very important role that developers play in building secure applications, but there's a very important role that open source software security plays, and security of third-party and proprietary code, and things that are composing modern apps. So developers are one element of that, but leaning left in a sense and giving them easier means of adopting safe and trustworthy software as they compose those applications is a big part of what we're doing. So you mentioned supply chain, for instance, the software development lifecycle, and having developers find and fix security issues as they go. That's the core foundation of any software security program. But when you consider all these other sources of risk that are out of their control, you've got to make the security testing aspect of it as seamless as possible. You've got to make the ability to prioritize all this information and make it a transparent part of their process, to make it easier for them to adopt it and make it much more automatic and automated. So that's a big part of it. But the security teams will always have a role to play because of these other sources of software risk outside of what your developers are responsible for.
I think last time I checked, developers outnumber security people by a factor of 20 to 1, maybe more. So how do we get that security expertise to lean left a little bit in a way that bridges the divide between security people and developers?
Yeah, one major way that I believe, and you see this in what we're doing, is you have to make the technologies as easy to use as possible and as available and efficient as possible, so that if you look at what we've put together around SaaS delivery of these sorts of application security technologies, and what we're doing with our acquisition of White Hat by bringing more of this kind of testing into a single platform, making it more available to developers and more ingrained in the process and more API driven, ensures that it can get used in automated ways. If it requires anyone to stop and do it, they're not going to do it. And so those elements of SaaS delivery, continuous testing, and doing it in such a way that it's easy to onboard and automate through APIs is really how we can continue to make it as pervasive and invisible as possible, but still effective.
Do we need to slow down the rate at which applications are being built to make them more secure, or can we really put the guardrails in place and maybe keep building as fast as we've been building, or maybe even faster, and not have so many insecure application issues?
Yeah, I believe that if you put guardrails in place in the sense of, enable organizations to create the policies that make sense for them, not one size fits all, but the policies and the proper guardrails for how they do business, then automating around that is a very effective way of increasing velocity. So we definitely don't want to advocate stop and test. That's definitely not something that creates speed. What it does is create noise, and it creates work for people to go validate things. But when you can ingrain it in the process and create security pipelines that sit side by side with development pipelines, every bit is automated and efficient, then that can create velocity. And in a sense, that leans left provides insight very early in the process. And that all sounds enormously complicated, but when you have the technologies woven together and the ability to take all the insight from that and kind of automate the prioritization of what you need to work on, then we find it can be very instrumental in creating velocity. So that's what has to be true, I believe, for application security to be effective as the landscape has changed.
Do we need to shift where we spend security dollars today? Is there too much being spent on the perimeter? Or do we need to spend as much as we have been spending there, just add more into the application security bucket?
I definitely have seen over the years, I've spent times in security operations where the amount of budget typically is upwards of 10 times what you spend in the software layer. And then you consider perimeter protections of all sorts, network to cloud to container. Those are all, effective at creating, the hard candy shell, but the vulnerability of what's inside is critically important, because it's the data everyone is after, or it's the disruption of the software itself that's operating the business that malicious actors are after. And the perimeter is essential, but we've proven again and again in the headlines that it's not enough. And so we definitely see and are encouraged by the attention put on it through supply chain and from executive direction from the White House and things, putting emphasis on the importance of the problem, that we see increasing spending pretty significantly and putting the right attention on the core of protecting the software and the data, instead of spending it on the easy solutions, which make you feel better.
All right. It's kind of like defending a castle of old, right? You got these strong gates and you got these strong walls, but hey, the roof is wide open, right?
That's right. Exactly.
All right. Hey, Jason, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed today's Techstrong TV broadcast. We will be back on Monday, which I want to say is May 16th. And actually, I will be en route to Valencia, Spain for KubeCon. And we'll be doing live coverage from KubeCon. Do check us out there. But we'll have fresh content for you Monday here on Techstrong TV. Until then, be safe, be well, be Techstrong. We're out.